Hello and welcome to the debate right here at Press TV. I'm Marzi Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. Imagine trying to keep your family warm from freezing temperatures without proper shelter or heating, which is extremely difficult. However, this is a reality for people living in Gaza, as many are staying in UN shelters or bombed homes with few hours of electricity each day and basically no heating fuel available. This situation is a result of Tel Aviv's continual siege on the area and their latest onslaught on Gaza last summer. And now, to add insult to injury, Tel Aviv has opened dams and flooded the Palestinian areas with water mixed with sewage up to 3 meters. Again, the question is asked about Gaza. Where is the international outcry?
These tents are the sole shelters that a large number of Palestinian families have to protect themselves against frigid temperatures along the Gaza Strip. The coastal territory has faced an unprecedented cold snap triggered by heavy rainfall and severe thunderstorms. The Palestinians are trying their hardest to stay warm in the tents set up alongside their destroyed homes, despite a severe shortage of electricity and fuel for generators and heaters. Mazen, a mother of 3, says the storm is stronger than what they do to stay warm.
Whatever we do to try to stay warm, it's still cold. Water runs under our feet. The storm is strong and the sound of thunder resembles the sound of shelling. My children cry and complain of the cold most of the time, and I don't know what I can do.
Tens of thousands of other Palestinians whose homes were destroyed or damaged in Israel's 50-day war on Gaza last summer face the same situation. Israeli rights group B'Tselem said in January that Israel deliberately targeted and bombed Palestinian homes despite the fact that they were occupied. More than 2,140 people were killed in the Israeli onslaught, most of them women and children. And now, nearly 6 months on, survivors are still struggling to cope with the war. Their houses remain ruined as Tel Aviv refuses to allow construction material to enter the Gaza Strip, which has been under a crippling Israeli siege for the past 8 years. The siege has already brought severe hardships for the Palestinians. It has ravaged the Gaza Strip's economy, making it dependent on international aid, which Israel also prevents to reach the impoverished region. Hospitals with insufficient equipment and medicine, shortage of food and contaminated water, as well as a fuel crisis, are also among the difficulties Palestinians in Gaza have been facing over the years. In addition, Palestinians in Gaza are subject to Israel's daily aggressions, ranging from attacks to all forms of abuse. On Sunday, local officials in Al-Mughraqa village, south of Gaza City, said that homes were flooded there after Israel opened the gates of a dam on the border with the Gaza Strip without prior warning. Many analysts believe that Tel Aviv continues to behave toward the Palestinians in what they describe an inhumane way due to ongoing international silence.
We have to poke the international conscience and say to them, enough is enough.
Following Israel's summer devastating war, international donors pledged financial aid to help rebuild Gaza. However, they have failed to meet their promises.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program out of London, peace activist and former U.S. Marine, Mr. Ken O'Keefe. And out of Berkeley, California, investigative journalist, Mr. Lee Kaplan. Thank you both for being with us. Let's start this off in Berkeley with Mr. Kaplan. In your perspective, why would Israel open the dams even if some say Tel Aviv needed to prevent flooding? Why wouldn't they give the civilian population adequate warning about what they wanted to do?
Merzia, this is another example of the Palestinian welfare scam and the lies, which I'm sure Mr. O'Keefe is going to forward on this show. There are no dams bordering Gaza that are in Israel, and there are no dams in Gaza. The entire story of Israel opening up floodgates is a complete fabrication and lie. There are no dams in that area at all. Zero, zilch. And this is one big propaganda lie by the Palestinians. There has been a major, wait, let me finish. There has been a major storm, Alexa, which has also hurt Tel Aviv, has also hurt Israel because they have snow. And it is the storm that has caused the flooding in Gaza, which The storm is not the fault of Israel. It's a complete lie. It's pure propaganda.
All right. Well, Mr. Ken O'Keefe, crossing over to London. No floodgates actually in Gaza, according to Mr. Kaplan. This is all a creation of the Palestinians. Your take, sir.
Well, that's just a standard line on everything. Israel doesn't commit any crimes. Israel is a peace-loving democracy that's just trying to find a way to manage to cope with its neighbors who all want to kill them. I mean, this is the narrative, and it will always be this way. The fact is that Israel has done this before. They do have irrigation ditches, and they have water that they can easily release, and it will predictably go into Gaza. This has happened before. It's been mixed with pollution such as waste, human waste, and whatnot. This is not an old story. But Israel doesn't see the Palestinians as people. It sees them as subhumans and literally treats them as dogs. As we know, in the latest aggression last summer, they killed 500-plus children. They wiped out 92 families. This is normal for Israel. It's what they do.
Well, Mr. Kaplan, looking at the situation in Gaza in general, that we see that the Palestinians have not been allowed to get in the adequate supplies in order to rebuild their homes. And of course, there is not electricity for most of the day and not heating oil available. And it is a cold winter there. Aren't these violations against human rights itself, of crimes against humanity?
These are further lies, Merzier, that the Palestinians do in their welfare scam, trying to convince the world that they're victims of Israel. And it's one of the reasons why the Hamas can't improve the lives of their people, because this is all they do, is they run the scam. As far as electricity goes, Israel provides the electricity free of charge to Gaza. As far as the water goes, it provides all the water for Gaza. There are no dams. They created a lie that dams were opened up to flood their homes. The fact is their reservoirs were overflooded because of the storm. And as usual, the propaganda machine in that dictatorship decided to create an accusation against Israel. And when Ken says that 500 children were killed in the last war, every 17-year-old with a gun who was shooting at Israeli troops and was a combatant, they count as a child casualty. And it's enough with the lies and the bull crap that the Palestinians push trying to get world sympathy, and they think ultimately that they'll get more foreign aid and they can continue the war against Israel. The statistic that Ken has just given is actually from the UN itself. And are you telling me that any child that was killed, they were a combatant? Because we know many infants were killed, many toddlers were killed. Well, again, you're trying to put words in my mouth here. Now, let's clarify something here. When you had situations where small children were killed, those were the families of the Hamas leadership who were bombed in their homes, who were using their families and their children as human shields. And the Israelis targeted them, yes, because those were the leaders of the Hamas actions against Israel.
All right,
and the
Mr.
Hamas
Ken
Charter,
O'Keefe,
let me remind
Mr. Ken
you.
O'Keefe, thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Ken O'Keefe, your take on this. First of all, I didn't know in international, even in war itself, that kids could ever be targeted, regardless. And second of all, we know that there were hundreds and hundreds of children who were killed. Your take, Mr. Ken O'Keefe, on what Mr. Kaplan has just said.
Well, isn't he just repeating what I said? Israel doesn't do anything wrong. It's this peace-loving democracy just trying to find a way to cope with these people who hate them and want to drive them into the sea. This is the narrative, and anything that doesn't fit to that narrative can't come from the mouth of a man like Lee Kaplan. The fact that he says that Israel supplies electricity to Gaza, I've lived in Gaza. There is not nearly enough electricity. The average amount of electricity per day is probably less than 8 hours for most people. And to say that they're supplying electricity is just an absolute lie. Water, there is not nearly enough potable and actually drinkable water in Gaza. This is very well understood. I would encourage Lee Kaplan to go live in Gaza and drink straight from the tap. That would be a great exercise in just how truthful he is. And as far as the enemy killing children and accusing all of these children of holding AK-47s and fighting and being members of Hamas family, you know, is insane, absolutely insane. There are hundreds of innocent children, as well as innocent men and women who are not fighting. This is absolutely not debatable. But of course, Lee Kaplan will just simply repeat the idea that Israel just loves everyone and just wants peace. It's insane.
All right, stay with me, Mr. Ken O'Keefe and Mr. Lee Kaplan. Let's cross over and see what some of our viewers have commented about this issue on Facebook.
Hey Zionists, prepare your shelter somewhere else in the world because Hezbollah will destroy you very soon. It's very sad and shameful to see the world as silent towards Israel's terrorism. Hold Hamas and Iran responsible. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his occupying force are war criminals. The Jewish people who stole lands from Palestinians should return to America and Eastern Europe, where they came from. As the victims are Muslims, the followers of a peaceful religion, the world organizations are asleep. This is a situation that needs to be addressed today. The killing of the people of Gaza is purely an evil plan.
What about that, Mr. Kaplan? You've heard some of our comments talking about the killing of people in Gaza. How many Palestinians in Gaza have to die before it makes a difference in the international community? Not getting clean water, not enough electricity, freezing to death, and now not even having building supplies to rebuild after Israel devastated the region last summer.
You know, Merzia, you didn't ask me a question. You made a political statement.
It's
which
a question,
is full
sir.
of
It depends on how you answer it. It's up to you. Answer it, please.
Well, no. Yeah, all right. Let me answer it, Merzia. The fact is, Israel is not depriving them of building materials. They were depriving them of cement because they used them to make those tunnels that they were attacking Israel through. You talk about, with crocodile tears, about the children and civilians being killed in Gaza during the war. Well, the Palestinians, the Hamas, didn't use any of those tunnels to put those civilians into them as a protection place during the war. And Iran, let me point out, built those tunnels for the Palestinians. So when you criticize Israel and the Jews, when you criticize me as somehow advocating killing children and all the nonsense that you come out with, take a look at your own house. Iran supplied the materials and helped build those tunnels, and they didn't allow one civilian to hide in them during the war. They left the civilians out in the open with the intention that they should create an international incident.
Over 2,000 people being killed, over 2,000 Palestinians being killed last summer. What are you saying? They were all either terrorists or they were all being held hostage by Hamas? Israel didn't kill any of these people.
The 2,000 that were killed, the majority of them were armed combatants fighting the IDF. And if I'm, you know, this is part of the lies and the propaganda. They keep throwing out the figure of 2,000 Palestinians killed, suggesting that they were all civilians. They were not. They were armed combatants. They were killed fighting the IDF.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to you, sir, that the UN. It doesn't matter to you that the UN have given the statistics that these are civilian casualties. Does it matter to you that that's what the international part of the international community is saying?
Merzia, again, this is lying by omission. The UN is a kangaroo court. It has a multitude of Arab dictatorships, which make it a majority of it, and they put out the propaganda also. The fact of the matter is, 2,000 Palestinians were killed, of which at least half of them were armed combatants.
So
in the
you
war.
only accept statistics coming out of Tel Aviv, I'm assuming, Mr. Kaplan. Only Israel can give you the right statistics.
Should I accept statistics coming from a terrorist organization?
The United Nations, sir, is a terrorist organization.
The
United Nations is a terrorist organization, Mr. Kaplan.
The United Nations has supported terrorism. At one point, they even said that suicide bombings were legitimate resistance.
Okay, let me turn to London and get Mr. O'Keefe back in on this discussion. Mr. O'Keefe, looking at this situation in general, do you think that the international community is complicit at all with this? Because as we can see today with the situation deteriorating on the Gaza Strip, but there isn't a whole lot of noise really being made or anything really being done. There's not that much pressure being put on Tel Aviv, if any, to allow them to open the doors and break the siege, 8 years of the siege. Why is that the case, and is the international community complicit?
Well, there's more than one villain in this. Egypt deserves special attention. What Egypt is doing is disgusting. They are a branch of Israel. They could easily open up Rafah. They could help their Palestinian brothers and sisters, but instead they serve their masters in the United States with their bribe money, $1.3 billion a year. In addition to Egypt and its despicable role is also the international community. I have for a long time listened to the Palestinians, and they have said over and over, we do not want aid. We do not want to live as a charity case. What they need is freedom of movement and the ability to trade. What should happen right now is the port of Gaza needs to be opened, and commercial travel, trading vessels need to start sailing into and out of Gaza since Egypt is so corrupt. Now, I actually worked on this for many years and tried to get it going and to make it happen, but I was attacked on every single level, from the UK police to the political establishment, you name it, infiltration, subversion. But the bottom line is, if it ain't someone like me, somebody has to initiate trade, because there is no way for the Palestinians to live a dignified life while living on handouts. And actually, Israel likes it this way. They want them to be reliant on aid, which they largely control, them in Egypt. But trade is something that could open up the door for the Palestinians to live a dignified life. It's not a very sexy thing to talk about, and as soon as you start talking about trade, people will accuse you of trying to make money. But the bottom line is you cannot live a dignified life on handouts.
What about that, Mr. Kaplan, with Israel basically having put a siege, especially on Gaza, and even controlling the West Bank with a tight fist? And of course, we have the wall. We have so much of the crop, especially the olive trees that have been destroyed by the Israelis on the West Bank. The siege, even the fishermen cannot go out very far to fish. Is it true what Mr. O'Keefe has said, that basically Israel wants this tight control over trade for the Palestinians?
No, it isn't. Okay, Marcia, that must have been a 5-minute question. The fact of the matter is there is no siege. The population of Gaza has adequate food, and they have a good lifestyle there.
Can they come and go as they please? Can they come and go as they please?
They cannot. Not if it's a security risk for Israel. Now, you talk about trade. He wants to talk about trade.
Mr. Kaplan,
wait a minute. Let me answer. Are you going to talk over me, Marcia?
I'm asking you a question. Please answer it.
Well, I'm trying to. He talked about trade. Their basic trade seems to be to import missiles from Iran, from your country. So let's talk about trade. They don't prevent terrorism. They don't want to conduct business. It's a money train. It's a welfare scam to get foreign aid. The Palestinians get more foreign aid per capita than any other ethnic group in the world. They're the 6th fattest population in the world. This is all a welfare scam put together by an Arab terrorist movement called Hamas, whose charter calls for not only for wiping out Israel, but killing every Jew in the world. This is the fact. And Mr. O'Keefe there, who considers himself a great humanitarian, the fact of the matter is he is a mouthpiece for them.
Okay,
he's
so
an
all
ex-Marine who was kicked out of the Marines.
Kaplan,
I don't know why he keeps saying that.
So all of this is a scam. People dying from malnutrition, people dying from lack of clean drinking water, people freezing to death in the Gaza Strip. It's all a scam, according to you, sir.
The fact is there are not people in Gaza dying from unclean water, dying from inadequate food, and all the other stuff. This is all Pallywood.
And not dying from lack of medical care. Mr. O'Keefe, back to you with the situation. What has to be done to change this right now? That we see that after the onslaught last summer, nothing really has changed. The siege continues. Lack of medical supplies, lack of adequate clean water, and so many other basic necessities. Nothing much has changed. What will it take to turn this around?
Well, what definitely has to happen, and there should be no excuses from the PA or anybody else, and that should be war crimes charges. Those charges need to be filed at the International Criminal Court, and the International Criminal Court needs to stop being a kangaroo court that only prosecutes African nations. The United States also needs to be facing charges for an unlawful invasion of Iraq, in which 1 million to 2 million people were killed, millions of refugees, millions of orphans. There is no justice in this world. We need the International Criminal Court to actually serve the people of this planet who absolutely reject war, especially wars of aggression. And until such time as those criminals who are committing these crimes, namely the United States, Britain, and Israel, which are doing it more than anyone else, those nations need to be held to account leaders need to be prosecuted. They need to be put in jail. And ultimately, when we see that the law functions properly, there will be a deterrent. But until such time, Israel will continue to slaughter at will. It will erase 92 families wholesale. It will destroy civilian homes and schools, and it will do so without any consequence whatsoever.
And on that note, unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank both my guests for being with us. Out of Berkeley, California, investigative journalist Mr. Lee Kaplan, and out of London, peace activist and former U.S. Marine, Mr. Ken O'Keefe. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you joining us on another debate. Make sure you join us, same place, same time tomorrow. I'm Marzi Hashemi signing out from Tehran. Thanks so much, and goodbye.